Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Finweek Money Matters, the show that helps you manage your finances. I'm Timisho Greater. Well, my co-hosts for today are Tandisizwe Mahlutshana, who's the Finweek Deputy Editor, and Finweek journalist is Lisa Illingworth. And on today's show, we explore why more and more women are entering the workplace. We also take a look at our trade of the week and befriend the trend. Remember, you can read more about these stories and many others in this week's edition of Finweek that's on the shelf from today. The magazine is also available online in English and Afrikaans via mysubs.co.za. First, let's take a look at the cover story. While the presence of women in the workplace is increasing at a rapid rate, the reality is many households cannot survive on a single income anymore. This week, Finweek takes a look at why the stereotypical role of a mother as a caregiver and a father's role as the sole breadwinner applies less than ever. Joining me in studio is Hayley Arnessen, who's the Customer Loyalty and Exports Director at MSA, and Melanie Green, who's the Chief Expectations Officer at Great Expectations. Ladies, thank you so much for making the time to join us. I'm going to start with you, Lisa, because you wrote this article. And I know this doesn't just apply to women and them being mothers, but just women. But let's talk about motherhood. If a woman now decides that they want to become a mother, is that the kiss of death for their career?
I think there was a day and age where that was the case. I think there was a day and age where a mother went on maternity leave and she could say goodbye to her career. But fortunately today, that's not the case. Fortunately today, in some organizations, there is the opportunity for a mother to walk away from her career and to be able to come back, however further back, she is able to pick up again and to be able to restart her career. There are barriers that face that mother again. There are challenges that will face that person again. But it is possible, and they don't have to then kiss that career goodbye.
Let's start with you, perhaps, Hayley, in terms of seeing more and more women entering the workspace. I mean, has life become so expensive that we can't make it on a single income anymore?
Absolutely. I think that life has become more expensive, and in my case, I'm a single working mom, so there is no option there really. So women do have to enter the workplace, and then getting back into the workplace. I think very much, once you've had a child, very much depends on the company that you're working for and how flexible they're willing to be in terms of time, in terms of working part-time, in terms of keeping your toe in the water while you take a little time off to be with the little one.
Hayley's got a very, very challenging role. She has to do a lot of traveling. And I think, Hayley, you can explain to us how you manage to juggle your role with your travel, with your children, and not having a partner that is able to support you being in the household.
Absolutely, Lisa. So I'm required to travel out of the country, probably about 15% of my time, and so that is very difficult being a single parent. The only way that that's possible is having a fantastic support network. So I have domestic assistants at home that I cannot live without. I would say that Mavis is to me and to my children almost a second mother. She keeps my household running as I would run it if I was there. We have the same routine. If I don't arrive, everything happens exactly the same way. There are no surprises for the kids, there's nothing funny that happens, so everything kind of continues in that way. And also, I have built up a fantastic support network in friends and moms from school, and also family. So without those things, it actually is impossible to do.
I'd like to put it to you ladies that sitting here I'm feeling a little bit small. But I mean, I think that the fact is when a woman decides to fall pregnant, she doesn't decide to fall pregnant by herself. There's another person involved in this process. But if then we refer to it back in the day as that was probably the kiss of death in terms of a career, things are now slowly changing. Is the role and the responsibility of the man in that creation, is it changing? Are men saying, actually, when we decide to fall pregnant, it obviously impacts you and your work. Going forward, I'm going to continue playing this role and ensuring that you can be able to go back to your life as normal as it was. Is that role changing? Is that role still as it was back in the days?
Can I answer that? I think it's a concept we refer to as conscious co-parenting. And I do think that those are very definite conversations that have to happen, quite sort of meaningful, crucial and strategic conversations that have to happen at home, even before the baby is born, in terms of who is going to take charge of what. And yes, the woman is likely to remain the primary caregiver, and we have stats to show that generally women take 3 times the amount of caregiving work in the home. But the positive side, I think, is that in this new generation of dads, I think a lot of fathers are wanting to play a bigger role and are doing more. But I still think that you have these those of us women who kind of feel like we can do it all, and we want to take charge, and often we'll complain about the husband and the way he's put the nappy on or the way he's mixed the formula, whereas they should just shut up and let him do it, and actually the baby will survive, and allow him to take charge of what he wants to take charge of. But it is an important conversation.
Now I just want to ask about this movement that's emerging in terms of various organizations that are geared towards eliminating some of the disadvantages that working mothers or women have and are experiencing when they fall pregnant and etc. etc. That movement seems to be taking off, and there's companies or organizations that are working towards finding employment for women that are coming from maternity leave, etc. etc. Obviously there must be factors that gave rise to this sector, to this movement emerging. Sure. What are some of those, and are we seeing any differences going forward?
Yeah. From my research, this is a global movement. It's not just, our market is just one of a number of different markets around the world who are recognizing the value of having a more balanced gender quotient at the top of their organization. There's massive stats on this. I mean, just if I can quote some of the Deloitte stats on this, the business case is that there's a 53% higher return on equity for companies with more women board directors. There's a 42% higher return on sales for companies with more women on boards. And the reality is that you've got women apparently are 77% of consumer markets, women are the primary spender. Another stat that comes out of their study is that they influence over 80% of all consumer decisions. So if you haven't got a better gender balance at the top of the organization driving strategic decisions, you're going to be on the back foot. So I think it's the competitive edge that people are recognizing. We need to encourage more women in the workplace and to move to those higher positions.
Yeah. Now Hayley had an experience as well. I mean, Hayley was telling me about her experiences when she was working, then fell pregnant, became a mom. Tell us, Hayley, about your experiences of being able to do that transition.
Absolutely. So, I mean, I left a little bit before I had my child, so about 3 weeks before the time. At that time, you know how you feel. It's difficult to get out of bed, let alone go to work. And then once I had my son, I was able to take 6 weeks off full time. And then negotiated with the company that from that point onwards, I started working again, but that I worked from home, and I did it on a half-day basis and popped in for urgent meetings and those sorts of things. So that really allowed me to keep my toe in the water. That really allowed me to stay in contact. And when I had to return back to work after having been away, first of all, I didn't feel like I had really been away, and also from an emotional perspective, I'd had the experience of leaving my small baby in someone else's care while I popped out, and when I got back, nothing had happened. He was okay. So the first day back full time was all right, and that angst that nervousness, that doubt in yourself when returning back to work wasn't there, because I was able to remain a little engaged.
Hayley, you just mentioned that you took 6 weeks off. Maybe you can just come in here and tell us a bit more about that in terms of the maternity leave policies that we have. You're seeing them very different in countries. I think Russia, it's up to 18 months. Here in South Africa, the norm is about 4 months. In other countries I hear it's about 4 years. I mean, what's the, what is the norm when it comes to maternity leave policies, and what are the implications for the companies? Is it paid? I mean, what happens in that time? This is a cost to a company.
For sure. In this country, the general term of maternity leave is 4 months, although some organizations will allow up to 6 months. There's obviously certain parameters around that, and whether that's fully paid for maternity leave or it's partially paid. But it's very interesting if you look at the UK as an example, and that's where my main kind of source of point of reference is that maternity leave can be up to a year. And it's very interesting in the type of work that I do in maternity transition coaching, is it sometimes can be more difficult for a woman the longer that she's away, because so much changes back at work. Things change in a week. And the anxiety level of coming back after a year away almost gets higher if you've been away longer. How am I going to adapt into this new environment? What's changed? Is my job still going to be the same, or has everything gone beyond me? So I think that 4 months is pretty much a comfortable term. It's just what happens afterwards, and what do you get in place? What do you put in place to feel like you are managing both your work and your home life? That's really the issue.
I mean, before I ask a question about legislation, I just have to agree that, in many companies, I can actually see the value that women play, and I actually can see that they are needed to be there. Okay. I was having a conversation with a colleague yesterday, and I said, I can imagine a group of men sitting around a boardroom and deciding on a marketing campaign for sanitary towels for women. Can never happen. But on legislation, currently looking at where we are now, are there further interventions that you would probably like to see happen in terms of trying to, call it, level the playing field between the men and the women when it comes to things like maternity leave and going to work and back?
In my opinion, I know that there's stuff going on right now, and I don't have all the detail on it, but around this concept of quotas. And saying we're going to put our foot down, 50% of all senior positions have to be held by women. And you can put all the quotas in the world, but if the system operating within an organization and the culture of that organization isn't supporting that, you can, you're not going to make any impact, you're not going to make any difference. Yeah. So I really think it's not about that, it's more about every organization recognizing the business case. The business case is the loss of female talent comes at huge cost to an organization. If you have a senior woman and women fall pregnant later, so they've got a lot of career and behind them intellectual property that's been downloaded and so on. You lose that, you lose their goodwill, as well as the estimated cost of turnover is between 30 and 150% for the loss of a woman. So, to avoid that loss, what can you do as an organization to put a strategy in place? Flexible working needs to be a strategy, not a policy. How do you do that? And that's going to be a unique journey for every organization, and it needs more men doing that and driving it. We need the men involved in that.
And in South Africa, you can count on your hands the amount of organizations that are mom-friendly. In terms of having daycare facilities on site, having flexible working hours for mothers to be able to, have the best of both worlds, and to have remote working stations that mothers can be able to do that. You can count on your hand the amount of firms that have those.
What is the cost of that, though, Lisa? I mean, you've been working on this article. You say they're not mom-friendly. You're putting up a daycare center. The argument is if you have a woman who has a child downstairs, if there's the daycare center, she'll constantly be running up and down to check if this child is okay. But on the other hand, if they're there, then you know that they're focused on their job. So what's the opportunity cost here?
You've got a mother who's working and focused at her job, at her desk, with peace of mind, knowing that if something goes wrong, she's a call away, 10 seconds away from dashing downstairs to check that her child is okay. That is versus a mother who's at a loss to the organization, where she's dedicated 10 to 15 years of her life, developed a client base, possibly. She's given hours and years of her life, talent, experience. She's been trained by the organization. All of those things are a total loss and that's a single mother. Whereas now you've got a whole workforce made up of partially women. Are you going to lose those women at the expense of putting in a daycare center? You've got to do the trade-off.
And I mean, if you look at the value of what a mother brings, specifically if you look at a single working mother, those girls are serious about their jobs. Their jobs are a have to have, not a want to have. They're serious about their jobs. They understand what responsibility is all about. On top of that, being a mother, just a mother in general, really brings kind of natural skills, leadership, teamwork,
resilience,
resilience, time management, planning. All those things are kind of things that they do all the time and practice naturally. And if you're having a look at a team, it would really not be a true reflection of society to have a team of all men or women that don't have kids because they're easier, because they're not going to steal time to pop to the doctor or fetch a little guy out of a tree, which really did happen to me. It completes a team. It gives a real picture.
It's a not so nice picture if you look at the listed companies on the JSE. I can think of only one company that's listed that's run by a woman, and that's Barclays Africa Group, and maybe the JSE itself by Nikki Smith and maybe the chairman. But I mean, I suppose it's not only the status quo in the corporate world. You find it everywhere in the world, and you find it in politics, you find it in things like sport management, you find it pretty much everywhere. And I'm sitting here for all the men out there, and I'm agreeing that things need to change.
Ladies, thank you so much for making the time to join us today. And just on that final point, not just talking about women that have children, but on average, women are being paid less in South Africa than men. So we really need to move forward and try to level the playing field there. That was Hayley Arnessen, who's the Customer Loyalty and Exports Director at MSA, and Melanie Green, the Chief Expectations Officer at Great Expectations. Well, after the break, we take a look at the trade of the week, and we also have a look at our beef friend, the trend. We'll be right back.